Hey, Rowan, how you doing?
I'm all right. How about yourself?
Good, good. Thanks for joining me today to talk about these coffees and Phil and Sebastian. It's very exciting stuff.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, how's your day going so far?
Well, it's all right. We got a spot of snow here. It's coming down pretty hard. I'm just looking out the window here. It's doesn't feel like spring, that's for sure.
I I'm I'm sure it doesn't being in Calgary. That's definitely a colder place, very much for sure. So sorry about the location. It's one of those days where I'm at the cafe. So I was like, hey, gotta find a quiet spot. I'm
All
dying.
good.
Well, so to begin with, I just learned about you from Jill and could not be more excited to have you Rowan with us. I don't remember if this is your first time competing in the Barista Championships, or I think you've competed before, correct?
Yeah, I competed in Vancouver before, so that was 2 years ago.
Okay.
But this recent competition in Montreal, that would be second my second barista competition anyway.
Okay. That was absolutely wonderful. And it's really exciting to hear you have already made it to finals, I believe, which when are finals happening?
Well, the Canadian Barista Championships are over. So
Oh,
that
okay.
was the Montreal event. So bit of a different format this year.
Okay.
In the States, the format's a little bit different than in Canada, but this is the first year that we didn't really have a regionals. Normally, you'd have a separate event for Western Canada and Eastern Canada, and then one event for the nationals. This year, it was kind of rolled all into one. So over the course of, I think it was 4 or 5 days, I think a total of 35 competitors competed, and then that was nailed down to the top 12, which was then nailed down to the top six, and and then we have our Canadian barista champion, which is Nelson from from Rosso from Calgary here as well, and he'll be competing in the worlds soon.
That's absolutely delightful. Yeah, man, it's always a treat to being able to meet people who've competed, who, really strive for excellence. And so the fact that, you guys have done it time and again and that you were involved in that is just absolutely stunning. And yeah, really, I didn't see your routine or anything of the sort, but I was reading Phil and Sebastian's all of their things, of course. And it was saying that one of your routines or I guess your main routine or whatnot, you were trying to, I guess, reincorporate or kind of talk about sustainability with milk and or steaming or something along those lines. Yeah, could you just kind of, I don't know, just chat about that just for a sec? Yeah.
Of course, yeah. So obviously, the barista competition is mainly about coffee,
Mm,
and that is the main deciding factor whether or not you move on and how well you do is how good your coffee is tasting and how well you can describe it.
mhm,
Competitors maybe forget is that the emphasis should be on that.
mm,
Regardless, if you really want to excel, your presentation should have a theme, should have a point.
mhm,
What we're really trying to do as a coffee community is select someone who can be a representative for the specialty coffee industry. So the sets that really do very well, and the sets that made it into the top six, what was consistent about them that they had something to say. They either brought something new to the table, a new technology, a new way of thinking about coffee, a new process. Um, so my set was, as you said, about sustainability, which is not a new theme, not but a far stretch. We talk about sustainability a lot in coffee.
mhm,
But in my opinion, it's not. It's quite frequently just something that we just say. So specifically what I was talking about is the sustainability aspect of milk that we use in the cafe.
Mhm.
And I don't know exactly how it is in your cafe, but for sure in the vast majority of specialty coffee shops in Canada, when you make a latte for someone, you pour your latte art, you hand out the drink. You're most of the time you're going to have a little bit of leftover milk, and that milk we put down the drain.
Mhm.
And we don't want to reuse that milk. And there's a couple of different reasons that we don't want to do that. The main cited reasons are quality concerns and health and safety. And those are the two things that um, when I got introduced to the Canadian specialty coffee scene, those were the reasons that were always told me, is that we do not want to reuse this milk that we used to the previous drink, because if we do reuse it, we're gonna make a lower quality drink. And not only that, it also goes against health and safety regulations.
Mhm.
And you can confirm this by going online, going on Reddit, or going on whatever coffee forum you want, and the reaction to someone reusing previously heated milk is quite visceral. So I thought, well, I wanted to really investigate that and see, okay, well, how much is there to this? Because when I started being a barista, I'm originally from Germany. I moved to Canada about 6 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, I worked in a fairly old school coffee shop, and there it was just reuse that milk, just continue using the milk. You're not throwing anything. I mean, they were not a particularly great cafe, but that was the norm. You're reusing that previously made milk. So I did quite a bit of research. I reached out to our own Canadian health service department, who's responsible for setting the rules. And according to them, as long as your milk is not kept between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 140 degrees Fahrenheit for over
Mhm.
4 hours, there's no concerns with reusing that milk in any capacity. So for cooking or for making a drink. And if you think about it, um, why would milk that you heat in a pitcher, and then you make your latte art and you have a little bit of milk left over in the pitcher? How does that suddenly go bad? How is that
Mhm.
different from just having your latte sitting there on the table while you're talking over the course of 20 minutes?
Yeah.
So from a health and service perspective, there were no concerns. But what about quality? Because the main thing that people have criticized about that is that your texture is going to be off and going to get weird.
Mhm.
You're not going to be able to make that nice silky texture. So we did a bunch of taste testing, blind taste testing, and tasted a lot of milk. And we progressively steamed lattes with progressively more, containing more re-steamed milk. So starting with 5% and all the way up to, I think, 90%. We steamed a latte with 90% of previously heated milk and there's 10% fresh cow's milk. And those are also very surprising because um, we did all these tests blind and we did a huge sample size, but the common thread was that it was very difficult to tell which is the one containing re-steamed milk in ratios up to 50%. So 50% old milk and people that have been working in this industry for 10, 20 years, really, really seasoned people, were not able to consistently say, oh, this is obviously the one containing old milk. And not only that, there was actually some evidence to suggest that there was an improvement in the taste if you re-steam your milk.
Okay.
And there's a lot of assumptions that we can make at this point, but consistently the milks containing around the 20 to 30% previously heated milk had more caramelized flavor, more sweetness, and so the
Oh,
implications of that are pretty exciting. And that's what I built my
yes.
set around, is let's just collectively question this practice of just dumping down milk if we don't really have a good reason for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so sorry. Give me one second. If it's long, sure, I guess. Or ask Aaron, to be honest. I'm so sorry about that. Uh, um,
Of course.
anyway, that is an absolutely exceptional routine, to be honest. This is all news to me, Rowan. So I mean, having been someone who's, I've only been in the industry for about 6 years or so, but this has been something that like I've never researched. People I've worked with have never researched this. We've always just been under the assumption that you don't re-steam milk, It's just like, hey, it's probably not good.
No.
Um, so this is actually like the coolest thing to hear you just saying that like no, like actually there might be some improvements, so to speak. And now that's like
Yeah,
honestly,
absolutely.
yeah, that's I mean it's inspiring me to just I mean honestly give it a go this next week just to see what happens here and if that's something that could totally reshape how we steam and even in the last few months, we've been really trying to get to the point where, like, basically we use all of the milk in the pitcher, but I mean, like, sometimes it just doesn't happen that way. And, for macchiatos and cortados, we have to put a little bit more milk in there to like steam it well. And so, like, man, that's actually like
Yep.
really exciting. So, man, I'm really glad to hear you did such a just a wonderful presentation. Yeah, just for your competition. And I mean, sounds like you killed it, to be honest. So, man, I'm absolutely
Oh,
hyped on
thank
that.
you.
And yeah, no, I couldn't be more excited that we happened to get you. No offense to Jill, we love Jill, but hey, this is exciting. I get to chat with you today. Well, so a few other
Absolutely,
things.
yeah.
Yeah, so a few other things. Um, before we move on to the coffees, yeah, talk to us more about just kind of your background, as well as just kind of Phil and Sebastian. If I remember correctly, you are the head trainer or head manager or something along those lines at Phil and Sebastian, which is like pretty cool. No big deal. Um, but yeah, talk to us more. And actually, before you do, I just realized my laptop is about to run out of battery. So let me grab my charger real quick, and then I will be able to
Yeah,
keep
better plug that guy
going.
in.
Wonderful. Yeah, usually these calls I do at home, but it was one of those busy days where I was like, gotta gotta stay at the cafe. All right, here we go.
Hey, I hear you. I hear you.
Wonderful. Okay, I think I'm good now. Perfect. I'm golden. So you mentioned that you are you originally from Germany?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Germany. That's where I grew up and where I went to school and where I went to university. And then I moved to Canada, Calgary, about 6 years ago now. And I've been working with Phil and Sebastian for just over 5 years.
Okay.
So it wasn't my first job in Canada, but it was close. And I just started as a barista, and I had a decent amount of coffee experience from Germany. I said I was working for that other coffee shop and was doing classes and
Hmm.
public coffee tastings, things like that.
Yeah.
Currently, I am the trainer for Phil and Sebastian, which means
Mhm.
that it's my job to take all of our new hires and introduce them to the world of coffee and train them up and make sure that they're able to execute on the quality expectations that we have in the cafe. Not only that, I also do advanced training. So for people that have been around for a little bit longer, to continue to make sure our baristas are progressing and are engaged and are learning and giving them the resources to explore the world of coffee. So we want to obviously when someone's new, we're not going to overwhelm them with all the intricacies and all the different things that are possible. But our goal is to have continuous training throughout the time that someone is working for us. Um,
Hmm.
so my main job is working at our headquarters at our office, and we have a training room there, and that is where I get to sit and talk about coffee all day, basically. And in competition season, I also help our other competitors prepare for competition and make sure that we have a fair in-house competition that we get to send to Aeropress and Brewers Cup, and all of these other things. So that is kind of what I do in the company.
Absolutely. That's that honestly, it's jobs like those and like that I hear people doing and I'm like, man, you're living the dream. And, and I mean I am too, don't worry. But man, just what a unique opportunity. I don't know how much you know about Comet, but we actually carried years ago. I believe we carried Phil and Sebastian for anywhere between 1 to like 4 or so years. I really don't remember. It was before I worked here, but I mean, it's kind of a Canadian roaster that's, I mean, remarkably well known. I mean, as far as Canadian roasters go in the US, it's one of the most well known, at least for us personally. Yeah, and I mean, I personally think it's one of the better ones out there, which is, I don't know, I think that's pretty cool. But no, yeah, you guys
Yeah.
are
I
obviously
feel
killing it.
Sebastian is it's an interesting company, I think, because the people who own and run the company, Phil and Sebastian, they're real people, and they're quite well known in the international coffee community, and they're very much still involved. And they, if you learn a little bit about the Canadian specialty coffee scene, it's very surprising to see how formative they have been in helping grow the Canadian coffee scene, and also having a very you know a hand in creating or helping some of our other very well-known coffee companies. So Monogram, for example, which is another excellent coffee company.
Yeah.
Ben Putt, who's been our champion for the last feels like 10 years.
Yes.
He started at Phil Sebastian, and so our Calgary coffee scene is very, very strong, and you know, very competitive. But it's a wonderful community that we have here. We all know each other, and I think that's one of the wonderful things about specialty coffee is that the community that grows around it, and it's multinational, it's multicultural, it spans different continents, and but we all have a common goal and interest and passion, and I really think that's very special.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been told a wee bit about Phil and Sebastian and or whatnot. I know they've been around, I believe, over 15 years now. Um, but yeah, just kind of, briefly, can you give us a, kind of overview of them and just like the company and yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be too long, but yeah, just for those who, this is their first time trying a Phil and Sebastian coffee, they might be like, who who are these two guys? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the company obviously starts with the two people, Phil and Sebastian, who were friends. They both worked as engineers. They both went to school together,
Mm,
and they discovered a common love and appreciation for coffee in the mid 2000s,
mhm,
and they had a dream of somehow bringing specialty coffee to Calgary. There's a whole story about that, how they went to Vancouver and learned and
mm,
started getting an espresso machine in their garage and testing out roasting and stuff like that. But it all started with them creating a stall at a farmers market here in Calgary, and that was their
oh,
first location where they're actually serving coffee to other people.
mhm,
And that was that was I think 2006 or 7 or something like that. That's where they first started actually serving coffee,
man.
and from there on, it's been the company has obviously grown quite a bit.
Mm,
Following the farmers market location, they opened up their first brick and mortar location,
mhm,
and that was actually in an area of town called Mardeloop. And that cafe, which was their first brick and mortar location, was the place that I started at as well when I first joined the company.
mm,
I started at that location. Obviously, quite a few years after they had built it, but
yeah.
and then pretty much consistently they have opened up on average, I would say, a location every year or maybe every 2 years.
Mm,
So currently we have, I think, 8 locations within the city of Calgary.
mhm, mhm,
There's a headquarters in the downtown in an old historic building, which used to be a mattress factory, but it is this beautiful brick building with big wooden beams, and that's where our roastery is in. So that's where we
mm,
roast all of the coffees for all of our cafes, but also for the wholesale clients, the customers, online orders. There's also a cafe in there, which is kind of
mhm,
our flagship cafe. And one thing that makes Phil and Sebastian special, in my opinion, is that they're very much involved in all the aspects of running the company. So, for example, the green
Mm,
buying. And I've worked for a couple of different coffee companies, and I really think that our green buying approach is unique. Is that every year we go to Origin, or Phil and Sebastian go to Origin and buy the coffee there, but with the intent of building relationships with producers, and with the idea of working with someone for a long period of time. So it's obviously there they want to buy the best coffee that they can,
mhm.
but probably more important than that, they want to identify people in Central and South America and Africa that they can work with for the course of a couple of years, and really build a sustainable business relationship and collectively make the coffee better. So some of the producers that we're buying from, we've been buying from for almost like 10 years or something like that. And there's a certain amount of trust and relationship that you build there that is very unique.
Mm. Yeah, kind of piggybacking on that, if I remember correctly, this first coffee that we kind of used for like our approachable program subscription, the Merino Ruiz, if I remember correctly, I think this is one of those roasters that, y'all have been working with for like quite a while. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is a Colombian coffee,
Hmm.
and I think that's in our two range.
Hmm.
And yeah, so we've been working with that particular producer. I'm not quite sure for how long we've been working with them,
Yeah.
um, but he's definitely a name that pops up on a regular basis. That's for sure. So Sebastian is the person that goes to Central and South America and buys all the coffees. So he goes to Panama, he goes to Colombia, or
Mm.
Guatemala, and so forth. Uh, so whenever he goes, there's these producers that he hits up every single time.
Mm.
So yeah,
Yeah. It's an absolute lovely coffee. Um, yeah, and each time I get, a couple different coffees for each of our kind of approachable or exotic coffees, there's usually one that, I kind of prioritize, so to speak, because, uh, there's just a lot of people get it and, all the above. And so, I got to try this one at home. Was my first time actually trying it. I got some bags and I was like, all right, like before we do it on the cupping table, let's just try it as is. And it was like the first or second brew that I did that I was like, this is great. I was like, didn't have to hardly do anything. Um, and at home, everyone who does the subscription knows that right now I'm using an origami at home, which is what we use in the shop. So it's just kind of consistent all around. And
yeah,
I have a Commandante at home, and we kind of do this four pulse method, and basically 22 grams in, 330 out. And I went a little finer on this one. I think, yeah, I did the first one on 15 clicks, and I did this on 12 clicks, and it came out at around 4 minutes. And I was like, this is perfect. And it's always it's always a good thing when we find a roastery whose flavor notes where like we can taste every one of those. And like to start off with this coffee was that, like immediately blackberry and like violet or purple florals, and just almost like a lemon cream and brown
yeah.
sugar and tangerine. And it was just like a wonderful coffee to drink, and I was just remarkably happy with it. And it, as you mentioned, it's an R2. So yeah, so real quick, I actually don't even remember what the R stands for. But you have a few different categories of kind of, yeah, coffee. So kind of just walk us through those categories real quick.
Yeah. So as you know, you've been working in coffee for a long time. You've very likely had coffee from many different places. And as a roastery, one of the main challenges is to communicate to someone who's going to be buying this coffee or drinking this coffee, is how is it different from all the other coffees? Because it's someone who doesn't really know that much about coffee might not realize that there's a difference in varieties, in origins. It's coffee is coffee is coffee. So, and pretty much everyone has their own little system.
Mhm.
Someone might say light, medium, dark roast. Some might say give them specific names.
Mhm.
Some sell their coffees in flavor categories. So they have your citrusy coffees, sweet coffees, and the caramelly coffees. So there's all these different systems out there, and we came up with our own as well. And I think it is not saying that R1 is basic and R3 is excellent. It's not really referring to roast level or anything.
Yeah.
I think it really makes a lot of sense once you realize what the letter R stands for in R1, 2, and 3.
Mhm.
And it stands for radius. So if you turn one of our bags around at the back, there's a little diagram. So if you
Mhm.
imagine an arbitrary classic coffee profile, as in this is what coffee tastes like, and you put that in the center of a circle, that would be your R0, radius 0. And then
Mhm.
an R1 would sit at radius 1, and it would kind of orbit very close around that center. It's not really
Uh,
the classic coffee, but it's very close. It's
okay.
comfortable, it's chocolatey, it's nutty, it's all the flavors that you kind of expect out of a coffee. And then coffees at R2, they're a little bit further away. They're sitting at radius 2. So they're still close enough to that people
Um,
would recognize it. Okay, this I'm drinking coffee, but there's all this other stuff going on there. There's maybe some more
yeah.
florals going on there, fruit character. There's more nuance in the coffee. There's something else in here.
Mhm.
And then radius 3, R3, those are coffees that are wild and funky and weird. So that's where you get your heavy handed
Yeah.
naturals, your funky fermented coffees,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
some very citrusy and bright coffees that could be washed. But that's the kind of logic how we categorize our coffees. So
Mhm.
when we taste a coffee, we think, okay, well, how weird and funky is this coffee, and what category should we put this in? So this coffee
Yeah.
here is it's not really, even though it is I believe it's an anaerobic fermentation wash.
Mhm. Yep.
So it is processed, but it's very clean. It's not fermenty or weird. It's
Mhm.
just you still know, hey, this is a coffee, but there's all these other wonderful, gentle flavors that are in there that can
Yeah.
really start making you think about, oh, I'm not just drinking a coffee. There's more going on in this coffee.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what was so neat about this coffee is that it was very just like even keel, but also like a little fun. Which is just always nice, like I even, got to sample the standard, probably a month or so ago. And even that I was like really happy with. And I was like, wow, like what a fun time. Like just for like what a good representation of a standard cup of coffee. And that just was an absolute delight. And so to have this, Colombia it's a pink bourbon and it's like you said, it's anaerobic, but it's washed and it's pretty clean for the most part was a really nice coffee to have. And I mean, personally, for me, when I brewed it, I kind of just like even let it sit for a second and just cool down a wee bit. And then all of a sudden, everything just like for me popped out. And I was like, this is lovely. um, yeah, I couldn't be happier with this. And so, to hear that it's from a producer, like you said, whose name comes up a lot at Phil and Sebastian was just kind of a neat thing. It's an absolute delight always getting coffees from the same producer who's doing an excellent job, who's absolutely wonderful. And it seems like you guys are all about that for the most part. Yeah, and is there anything else just like either about Marino Ruiz or anything about the coffee in general that you just kind of want to add that, anyone might not know, so to speak, or that's kind of worth noting?
Well, I think the I think the variety is kind of interesting.
Mhm.
That this coffee is. So we're talking about a pink bourbon, and it's bourbon is a very easy around quite a lot, and but this one is slightly different. It's called the pink bourbon, and it's something that's really started becoming very popular in the specialty industry in Colombia. So within the last, I don't know, 10 years or something like that, um, the this new variety, pink bourbon, has really gained a lot of popularity. And I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head, but I believe it's a hybrid between yellow. It's this wonderful shade of pink. Um,
Yeah.
at least that was the kind of the common assumption, because we grow these Bourbon varieties, and it would kind of make sense with the yellow Bourbon. You pick them when they're this yellow color instead of the red, and then you go to red Bourbon, which obviously you pick when it's red.
Mhm.
But someone who's probably a lot smarter than I am has recently proven that pink Bourbon is actually kind of a misnomer, and that it is actually an Ethiopian heirloom variety that has came kind of over from Ethiopia,
Yeah.
which is, I think, why it is so different from the flavor profile of a red or yellow, like yellow Bourbon. And as you said, the tasting notes are a lot more reminiscent. You've got your gentle, your blackberry notes, your
Yeah.
violet, your tea notes, and those are a lot more evocative of your Ethiopians, your Kenyans. So I think that's really interesting. Is that how sometimes in coffee we name things that are completely incorrect, and we find out later that it actually has nothing to do with the genetics that we thought.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a very very cool variety. You see it a lot more, and you can market it quite well because pink Bourbon sounds kind of cool. But really, it's just an Ethiopian heirloom variety that is very popular now in Colombia.
Yeah, it was actually that's I'm glad you said that because it was actually reading about it on y'all's website that I also read that Pink Bourbon was not a hybrid between the two, yellow and red, but that it actually was genetically just an Ethiopian heirloom, and that just yeah, it blew my mind and it like clicked because I was like, oh wait, I think this does make sense. Because like you said, it's very sought after, and it's kind of I don't know, and I sometimes put it alongside like either Cedra's or Chirosos in regards to it. I honestly forget about Cedra, but if I remember correctly, Chiroso also was an Ethiopian heirloom, and these are sought after varieties, and so it's just like I see pink Bourbon everywhere, and so just the fact that it ends up being that, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense, and so that was really interesting to me to find out because of just its popularity. And I mean, honestly, you're right. Pink Bourbon, that sounds cool. Like, who wouldn't like a pink anything in coffee? And we actually even have a couple guys who come into our cafe who they've genuinely just been like, if there's ever a pink Bourbon, give it to me, and it's kind of funny because it's like, I mean, they're not wrong, so to speak, it is usually always good. Yeah, yeah. And so, just as a whole, this coffee ended up being an absolute delight. Um, yeah, it was wonderful. And so kind of moving on just to the Kenya, um, an absolute great Kenyan coffee. One of the things real quick that I'll say before I kind of ask you about it is just I think one of the things that was also mentioned on the website just when reading about it, I think is that this Kenyan kind of has almost like tropical, somewhat fruit forward profile than most Kenyans, or something along those lines. And I do think that's there. And I thought that was kind of neat to read because, for me, again, those notes are pretty spot on. I got like red grapefruit up front, some almost overripe blackberry or black currant almost, and very tea-like, and like a Bosch pear and like a prune finish. It was like really just smooth and just like I don't know, just so enjoyable to drink. And so this was a very unique Kenya because, and I say this all the time for our subscribers or just people in general who come into the cafe, is that we're not particularly fans of Kenyans at Comet because we tend to find that they're all the same, so to speak, or a little bit more on the savory side, almost too much. So when we come across a good Kenya, it we don't pass it up. And so this was a really neat one to find that was a little bit different. Yeah, so now, just to ask you, like I don't think I have heard personally of I mean I'm assuming Mahiga's probably like the washing station or something that y'all get it from or whatnot. But yeah, I don't think I've heard of this. I know it's from Nairi County, which we've had a lot of Kenyans from. But yeah, I mean, could you kind of just talk to us just a wee bit about, just this coffee in particular, or, if you guys have possibly had it for a, extended time, like a producer you've been working with for a while?
Yeah. So we're talking about the double A filter, right?
Yes.
Just making sure that we're talking about the same coffee. Okay, good.
Hmm.
Well, Kenya is an interesting origin. Well, Africa as an origin is quite a bit different than Central and South America,
Hmm.
because you're not really buying from individual farmers or producers. Whereas in Panama, you'd be going directly to the farm level. Most of the time, that's not really possible in Ethiopia and Kenya, and you're really buying from the washing station, the processing part, who collects coffee from all these different producers in the region and then sorts them, and then that's the person or the company that you're buying from. So
Hmm.
it's a very different green buying experience, and traceability becomes more of an issue as well. Whereas, for example, if you go to Panama, you know exactly where these cherries came from, and the traceability is a lot better. You can say, okay, this coffee is directly from that hill over there, and we're planting these varieties, and it's a lot more. It's easier to see exactly where your coffee is coming from. Um, but sometimes in Ethiopia or in Kenya, you just really go, like my money, please, and that's sometimes all that you know about the coffee. So it becomes really important to work with a partner in at origin, who does a lot of that heavy lifting for us. So working, having a good relationships with those individual people and knowing what their farm is like, what varieties are they growing, what conditions, what farming practices are they employing, so that
Hmm.
you have a little bit more traceability, that you know, okay, I know what varieties we are buying. So yeah, Mahia is the washing station that collects the cherries from the surrounding area. And they and when Phil is the person that goes to Kenya and buys all of the coffees, he's really interested with working with specific type of people. So, for example, I know we're talking about Kenya here, but to segue into Ethiopia for a moment,
Hmm.
one of the partners that he's been working with there for a very long time, he retired. So for the last 2 years, he's been really looking not just for coffee, but he's been looking for a person to work with. So someone, so a washing station manager, an exporter that aligns with his business practices and that he can rely on, and that they can kind of work together. So it's very important for Phil when he is buying from the Othaya co-op where Mahia is situated in, that he has a business partner there on the ground that aligns with our business practices, with our vision about coffee, and the result is a really cool coffee. And I can definitely sympathize with people that say like, "Hey, Kenyans are like not really my type of coffee," because I think Kenya is one of those origins you can oftentimes just pick out on the table. You're kind of looking for like that bright citrusy tomato
Hmm.
and a bit savory, and you know, well, that's definitely Kenyan on the table. And if you're not a fan of that flavor profile, you might put off from Kenyans. But this one, when I tried it in the cafe, and you can still tell it's a Kenyan, but it has a lot more desirable flavor uh, notes in there. So you do get a little bit more of those berry notes, the gentle tea notes that you maybe remind you more of Ethiopian. It's not just savory tomato juice
Hmm.
It is
It was probably only a year or so ago that I kind of learned of that in regards to, it is like you said, hard to work with farmers directly and, kind of working with co-ops. And so that was something that honestly kind of blew my mind in regards to truly understanding the concept of buying coffee from Kenya. And so, I mean, like you said, yeah, working with co-ops that are like really doing a good job to give you a consistent product is crazy, and I'm so happy about it, and it's wonderful that we're able to get a coffee like this from a great co-op that clearly is doing a great job, and it's times like these that now it's like, all right, I'm gonna remember Mahiga. And anytime I see that now, it's like, all right, I'll keep my eyes out because I had such a good experience with this one, and so it's really, really good just to come across another Kenyan that we're really happy with, and probably recently, within the last few months, we've actually started kind of carrying a few other Kenyans here and there, that we've actually like been like, wow, and so this was kind of a fun one to have also. Last month we did for our subscription we did Plot out of London, and they had also a lovely Kenya that I couldn't pass up. And I was surprised, I was like, was not expecting to like that Kenya whatsoever. And it's kind of the same with this one. It was like, wow, this worked out really nice. Oddly enough, that like we're now kind of bringing Kenyans back, so to speak. And oddly enough, it's kind of the same with Rwandas for us. We've started having Rwandas that we really like, and so it was really neat, yeah, to be able to have another Kenyan like this, just kind of in a subscription, and for people to taste and be like, wow, like here's another good Kenya, another reason to go back and have a good African coffee that is tasty, that is good, to be on the lookout for, and all of the above. But yeah, this also was just, I think for all of the four coffees that we used for our subscription from you guys, this, and I don't know why, but I think I had to brew this one four times just to really find the right spot for it. But I was always like around it, but eventually I did like 19 clicks on the Commandante and just like 3 minutes and 30 seconds out. And I think I just like had started with like 3:45 out, or then back down to 3 minutes, and I was like just kind of just finding that nice spot that like as it cooled I still had stuff going on that made me really happy, that I was like, we've done it. we And so this was just such a great coffee to just be at home and just kind of sitting with, and kind of like you had mentioned, I believe this coffee's in your R3 category, you're at radius 3 of, it's a little bit more, it's a little different. It's a little bit more funky, or I don't even know if funky is the right term for this coffee, but it's different. And this was so nice to kind of have to like be on the side of the Marina Ruiz in that regard. And yeah, it was an absolute pleasure to be tasting and to dial in and be like, wow, like what an enjoyable coffee to just kind of just sit back and relax and enjoy. And the fact that again it was a Kenya was like, hey, this is pretty cool. Because I mean, as much as we're trying to not have our menu dominated by Colombians. And so anytime we have any coffee that's not a Colombia, it's like, all right,
Yeah,
this is a win,
yeah.
so to speak. Uh, I'm dying.
And sometimes it just takes a bit of time to get used to a different origin as well. If you're just used to the flavor profile of Colombians, and you get something like a Rwandan on the table that you're like, okay, well, I haven't had this for a while. Sometimes it takes you just a while to just shift your frame of expectations to really get the coffee, and that can be a rewarding experience in itself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, that was an absolute delight. And, moving on to like the exotic coffees that we use, kind of for our subscription. This was I gotta say, if people don't know, this was such a wonderful experience like chatting with you guys, and Jill was just absolutely amazing and trying to find us the coffees we wanted, so that we like wanted to serve you guys and that we found the right ones. And so the first time we got samples, we kind of got your basic lineup. I think it was, just like the standard and R2 and R3. And it was like, okay, these are good. But like as a multi-roaster, we have people come in all the time who want the crazy fun coffees. And so I was like, well, like, let's
Yeah,
try, what if we got something else? And Joe was like, yes, like we have, don't worry, we have the crazy coffees. We just didn't send you those. And I was like, great, let me get them. And, y'all sent them and they were just phenomenal. And I could not have been happier. And what was wonderful about the Finca Mamoto to begin with, was that not only was it with geisha, but it was a natural, and it was like dehydrated or whatnot in such a way that just an absolute delight coffee. And it didn't taste like a natural. It tasted clean. It tasted crisp. The phosphoric acidity was like much higher than most. It was just like sparkling. Those notes were truly spot on, like just absolutely delightful. And so this was such a fun coffee to get. And I just like was so happy with it. And even this morning, I brewed it up at home, and I think I started with doing a 10-gram brew just to be like, hey, like, what if someone gets this and they want to make 10 brews of it, just 10 grams each? What would that look like? And literally the
yeah,
first brew I did of it was just phenomenal. It was just absolutely spot on. I did 10 clicks on the Commandante. It came out at 4 minutes, and it was just like everything just hit. Just black tea, just cherry cola, like a silky thin texture, and it was just juicy mouthfeel, like that apricot that's like very like like a juicy apricot question mark, that like it's not dry, it's not a boring apricot that's like maybe starting to get it's past its ripe stage, but it was just so fun, and it genuinely tasted like cascara. It's honestly been like a year or a little bit more since I've had cascara, but from what I can remember, it was like, holy moly, this is absolutely delightful. Yeah, I just could not have been happier with getting such a great coffee from you guys. So, yeah, just kind of walk, people through, I don't know, how special this coffee is, so to speak, and or what we might be missing. Yeah.
absolutely. Before I do that, I think it's my time to plug in my laptop. I'm just gonna get my cable real quick before I shut off here. So
That
I'll be
sounds great to
back in
me.
just one sec here. So
Yeah.
I'll be right back. Just a moment.
No worries. Mm-mm.
All right, I am back.
Hey, let's go.
Yeah, normally I'd be at the office as well, but I'm currently in my living room, so a little bit of an unusual setup. Okay, so the Finca Momoto. Well, that's a coffee I can definitely talk a lot about because I
Yeah.
was actually just recently there, just a week ago,
Wonderful.
and I was visiting. We were buying coffee from Panama, so me and Sebastian we went to the Hartman farm,
Mm.
and we visited the Finca Hartman, Paulo Verde, Guarumo, Mi Finquita, and of course Finca Momoto. And the interesting thing about the Hartmans are that they're all siblings, and they kind of share this big project. So they collaboratively run their big family farm.
Mhm.
But all of the siblings have their own private project as well, and this is the private farm from Alice, who's absolutely delightful. She's a really wonderful woman,
Yeah.
and Finca Momoto is this comparatively small farm if you compare it to the family farm of Paulo Verde, and it's about a, I don't know, I would say it's like a 15-minute drive up the mountain from the main farm, so it's a little bit of a higher elevation. And it's a really, really fun coffee. I consistently, from Alice Hartman, from her farm, are just really at another level, and not just in terms of quality, but in terms of character. I remember the first time I had coffee from her farm was about two or 3 years ago. I like the coffee so much. I think I bought 5 bags of it and still have 1 bag in the freezer. So just trying to hold on to that a little bit longer. Sometimes you come across these coffees, you just have to kind of keep them as long as possible.
Yep.
But this specific one is just really, really cool. Now this is obviously from previous harvest. So when we were there just a couple weeks ago, we were tasting the new fresh Panamanian coffees, and I got to taste some coffees from Finca Mimosa as well, and there's some really cool stuff coming. This coffee here is, as you mentioned, it's a natural geisha, but it's what really makes this coffee interesting is the way that it's dried. So it's not just a normal natural where you put them on your raised beds and let them dry. As with a lot of other Panamanian producers in the last couple of years, they've really started to embrace this idea of dehydrating coffee instead of just drying it in the sun, as you get more consistency and you get a more desirable flavor profile. And the Hartmans obviously still have coffees that they fruit dry, but by dehydrating it in this dehumidification chamber, you get so much more control about the process. So you can control your airflow, you can control your temperature, and you really get an incredibly clean cup of coffee. That you kind of eliminate any chance of defects happening, any wild fermentation, and the result is you get all that wonderful character and fruit from the natural, but you get that control and the nice cleanliness of a wash. So the key to high quality naturals is that slow and even drying, because you want to replace the waters in the cherries with sugars in the process called sugar migration. And if you dry your cherries too fast or at too high of a temperature during the sun, and then sometimes those variables that are beyond your control because you just have a raised bed and maybe you don't even have a shaded bed where you can kind of control those factors a little bit more. You're kind of at the whim of what the weather's like. So sometimes your drying just goes way too fast or way too slow, and that's how you get that inconsistency, which is kind of the character of naturals. But using a dehumidification chamber, you can really control that process. And as a producer, you can really dial in the sugar content, the amount of funk that you want in your natural. You can really have a lot more control about this. So yeah, Finca Momoto is a wonderful farm. It is all a family operation, and they're very much involved in all the different processes from growing the plants to maintaining them year after year. And I can definitely testify that because I was just there. And this specific coffee is just a wonderful interpretation of the geisha. You have those notes that you're looking for, the peach and the flowers and those tropical notes. But it just has so much character, this coffee, which I really love. It's not just like a clean geisha and you're like, oh cool, this is a very expensive coffee. It's just fun, and I think that's something that oftentimes we lose sight of in coffee. That coffee is supposed to have character and fun, and I think this is a really good example of that.
Yeah. No, that's a perfect way of putting it, because drinking this coffee was just like, man, like I remember when we were first trying it. I think it was even before we cupped it. We brewed it up once, maybe twice, and I was tasting it with, I think, both the assistant manager and lead baker here, Aaron and Haley. Um and I just remember Aaron was like in the back, and he just came up and he just looked at me. He's like, dude, this coffee, it's pretty tasty. I was like, yeah. Um, and just he and I and Haley just kind of like kept going back to it just to drink more. And it's a good I mean, it's a good coffee if the server is just empty within like a minute, and that's just kind of what
Yeah.
happened. Is we were just like, hmm, that's really nice. Um, and we were just like, yeah, it was just so, we were just so happy with it. There was just like, it was before even cupping it, we just brewed that one and we were like, all right, like, we know we want it. Like, and that's always just so special when we've yet to put it on the cupping table, and we've just, just because we had time, let's just try it real quick. And it was just so good in that way. And, you know, kind of even reading the story a little bit, like kind of you said, I didn't really realize that they're all siblings. And so, hearing that this was Elise's farm and is one of the siblings and all that stuff, just was like so cool. And I was like, wow, like, so this is kind of my first time having, Elisa's coffee, or Lisa's, or however you say, her name. And it was just like absolutely delightful. And so now it's like, wow, I want this again. Very much so. So, yeah, this is definitely a coffee that's like, all right, if we can get our hands on it again, that would be ideal. Yeah, absolutely a delight. And just like you said, just especially for a geisha, which we've kind of found recently in some of the geishas we've been able to serve, which is super fun, that we've been able to have these geishas like Finca Mamoto that for us kind of do have more of a juicy mouthfeel as opposed to only being floral. And I just really love that. I really appreciate that because it's in my mind just a smidgen different, that it's noticeable. And I don't know, I just really like it because we have some really fun, coffees even right now on pour over that are really fun. And we have some fun ones that are just like really floral and clean, but just don't have this juicy mouthfeel that this one has. And so, like, just because of that, it's like, whoa, like this is very unique. Yeah, I could not have been happier with this one at all. And I think literally the first brew I did of this was also just like perfect. It came out at like 320, and I was just like, I'm so happy. I was just like, just like couldn't have been
Nice.
happier, honestly. Yeah. And so this one was just
Nice.
such a winner for us. Yeah, we got lucky. Um, and to be honest, it was funny that when we got this as a sample, it was like, right after you guys had the Finca Hartman um in the Uncommon collection too. And I was kind of a bit bummed because I was like, that looked good. So I was like, I mean, this one looks good, but like the other one almost looked better. We'll see. And I now after tasting it, I was like, part of me is like almost like I don't even care about the other one anymore because it was just so good. I don't even remember what, like I don't even remember what it was, because this one was
Yeah.
just so phenomenal that it's just like, man, this is all I want now. And so this was just so lovely, absolutely lovely. Yeah, and to move on to the, just the last coffee that we kind of used for your subscription, or for our, sorry, for our subscription, we used the Gallo Marias geisha, and this just absolute delight, absolute delight. Again, just tasting notes spot on. And for me, what I really liked about this one was that it, for me, didn't particularly have so much of a juicy mouthfeel as much as it had a very clear orange and almost berry component to it. Personally, that I was like, this is just a standout in that regard, especially for a washed geisha. I was just remarkably happy with. And, kind of same thing. First brew I did, I was like, it's a geisha, let's go a little bit coarser. And I did 17 clicks and it was like 320 out. And I was like, this is phenomenal. I don't even have to try this again. I was like, this is great. Uh, um, and it was just, yeah, I mean, my notes are just, I think I wrote down chocolate covered oranges, vanilla, floral, which were all on there. And I threw in blueberry on the end because I was like, there's some sort of berry component that was just like really like subtle, but just there, that just really came out as it cooled. And I was like,
Yeah,
man, is this tasty? Um, but yeah, I don't think, to be honest, I don't know if I've heard of this producer before. And I was so happy not only to, for that reason, but to have another fantastic coffee from Ecuador. So yeah, you mind just also walking us through what about this coffee?
absolutely. So this is a coffee that's actually a bit of a staff favorite at our flagship cafe. So pretty much every time I'm there, someone's making a pour over this. So
Yeah.
it's always a good sign when that coffee is when the staff is really enjoying it. And I can definitely understand why. It is super tasty. It is a lot. It is quite different than the Thinkamamoto that we talked about. It has a little bit more of those classic geisha characters that you expect from it.
Yes.
Uh, Very flowery, citrusy. It has that
Mhm.
kind of pink flavor to it that I really enjoy. Um, but it is a very different origin, and Ecuador is a country that we haven't historically bought from in the past. So it's only this and last year that we've started buying from Ecuador,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Oh,
it's
hold
really
on.
been an interesting. Yeah,
Yeah. I'm so sorry. Hold on 1 second. What? Um, I'm so sorry about that. But yeah,
okay.
is a very good Ecuador that was just an absolute delight. So yeah, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, yeah. So Ecuador is an origin that we haven't historically bought from before. There's a couple of different reasons for it. But these last 2 years where we've started buying from Ecuador, it's really been an interesting journey because we've discovered so many amazing coffees.
Mm,
Last year, when two of our staff competed in the Barista and Brewers Cup, they had both used coffee from Ecuador, and this specific coffee is the producer is interesting because he has been working in coffee for a long time, but not necessarily as a farmer.
yeah.
But this is from his family farm. So he took all the expertise that he has from working in the coffee industry and applied it to his own farm. And the result is a truly remarkable coffee. And
Hmm.
this is from a brewing perspective, I think it's a fairly forgiving coffee in my experience when I've brewed it. I've brewed it kind of up and down the grind setting scale, and consistently there's different flavors that come out, but consistently I find it has character. It is a coffee that is just such a high quality that it's kind of going to taste good no matter what you do to it. Sometimes you get those coffees where they almost brew themselves, and you don't really have to work to get a good tasting cup. And I think this is a very good example of that, where it is such a delightful coffee, and it has so many different things to give. It's not the heaviest coffee. It's not super fermenty and juicy and thick, but it has a lot of depth and it has a lot of character that I think anyone who enjoys brewing and getting to know a coffee will enjoy, because every brew, if you change the variety, you're still going to get a very good cup of coffee, but you might get something else out of it.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, this coffee was just absolutely clean and fruity and floral, and there's not much more we can ask for. It was just such a delight to taste, especially on the cupping table after already brewing it, and we were already like, this is great too. um, on the cupping table was just like one of the standouts, and I was like, yeah, it makes sense. And it's always a neat thing when we have, because usually when we do our cuppings, and we cup twice a week now, and we kind of have a team cupping on Fridays, and we cup publicly on Saturdays, kind of just for anyone who wants to join us. And it's always a neat thing when we throw in some of our like coffees that we're currently serving on the wall or whatnot, and sometimes we think it's one of those coffees, or it's as better than, or whatnot, is always a delight for us to be like, yeah, all right, this nice, I see you, Phil and Sebastian, like. And so this was one of those that really did stand out very well, that we were very happy with. And it was just, yeah, it's just such a fun one. Like, in this one, not a lot of people got in our subscription because it just kind of is the way it is, but it was just such a fun one to have. And oddly enough, it just worked out great that we also have an extra one that we'll kind of be doing like a giveaway, so to speak. And so I couldn't be more excited, because it's just like, man, whoever gets this coffee is going to be a lucky one for sure. Because yeah, it was just so good. But yeah, I mean, and lastly, we had a coffee from you guys that, if I remember correctly, the Richard Granda, which, if I remember correctly, is also a geisha, correct? I kind of forgot.
Um,
Honestly, don't remember. I'll have.
I'm not quite sure. Jill had sent me a list of the copies that you got. But is this that is another filter copy?
It's an espresso that actually because every once in a while, there's a coffee on the menu that we're like, oh man, we just kind of have to get this because it looks so good. And honestly, that kind of happened here too. And oh yeah, it does say it's a geisha. I just looked it up. But yeah, this, was one of your espressos. It says Richard Granda in Ecuador as well, a natural geisha. And it was kind
Right.
of one of those
That's
where,
that's the
yeah, yeah. And this was kind of too cool. It was like, oh my gosh, like let's just get some bags of this and throw it on some Spro, and let's just have a good time with it. And to be honest, I've yet to have it. It's been on espresso the last like few days, but I was off the last few days, and I haven't even had it yet today, which is surprising, because usually in the mornings, half the time or more, I'll just at least have one or two single shots just to like try whatever's on espresso. But um kind of got off to a late start this morning, so I haven't even tried it yet. But yeah, just another coffee that looked really neat, that we were just really happy to kind of, you know, put put on and just have a fun time with. And so far, other people have been like, "Hey, like, where's this from? Like, these guys are great." And it was like, "Hey, yeah."
yeah.
And so it was just like another way that
Well,
we
I
could
can,
kind
I
of,
can tell you a little bit about the coffee.
yeah,
I can tell you a little bit about the coffee. The it's interesting once you get to know all these producers and kind of dig around who these people are and where they live. It turns out a lot of them kind of know each other. So
mhm,
this producer will be friends with this one, and then you're like, oh well, I hang out with this guy all the time. And one name that keeps popping up a lot is Mauricio Chata, and he's a person that we buy coffee from quite a lot. But I very high functioning people. So
Hmm.
as another Ecuadorian, this is a new origin for us. But this is a coffee that has we have it at our flagship cafe right now
Hmm.
as a uncommon selection espresso. Um, I I've made it a couple times, and I've kind of it's a coffee that is almost kind of opposite to the previous coffee that we talked about, where the last coffee kind of brews itself. This one is a coffee that really challenges you as a barista. Not that it doesn't taste good, but it just kind of demands your attention. It
Mm.
really puts you to the test because it puts into question a lot of preconceived notions that you have about making espresso. So if you're someone who I just use the same recipe all the time, and my coffee just runs 30 seconds, and that's just the way that it is, you're probably not really going to get the full benefit of that this coffee has to offer, especially the way that it's roasted. It is roasted with a way longer development time than a lot of our other espressos, which means that
Oh.
the color of this coffee is very even from the outside to inside, which means that this coffee actually does perform really, really well at shorter shot times. And this is something that Paprika actually built its entire competition set around is roasting and roasting in such a way where especially coffee, we have this idea of that, light roast is that's the only roast there is, and medium dark roast, we don't really like that. But Paprika has kind of done a lot of research into this, and he's kind of shown us that if you have a very light roast, um, as you know, it can kind of taste a bit grassy and a little bit one dimensional.
Hmm.
And a big reason for that is the uneven color from the outside of the seed to the inside of the seed, where you have a decent color on the outside, but the density of the coffee is a gradient there. And the way that this coffee was roasted is with a longer development time, but with a similar color to what we're used to. So by doing that is like low airflow, low rate of rise, long development time, which means that the bean is very fragile.
Yeah.
So you can actually get amazing shots out of this at like 17 seconds,
Yeah.
right? And if you're just someone who says like, oh, espresso has to run 30 seconds for it to taste good, you're never really going to explore that realm. So I think this is a coffee that is really, really fun to work with because, yeah, sure, it's going to taste amazing even at basic brew parameters. But if you are brave enough to kind of like go outside of those parameters and really kind of push your own expectations about coffee, you'll get rewarded with like an amazingly complex coffee and amazing mouthfeel, super tropical flavors, and I think this is a really really cool coffee to put your skills to the test as a barista. So
Mhm.
I think last time when I was working with Paprika on this coffee, we settled on something like 22 grams in and like 54 grams out in 17 seconds. It was a weird dial, but it tasted incredible.
All right. I'll have to try that definitely. Tomorrow morning I probably will, if not honestly today. Because that sounds like an absolute delight. And this was a coffee that I was actually quite looking forward to trying because I hadn't had it yet. And so yeah, no, I'm really stoked about it. But no, these coffees have been just wonderful to have, and we couldn't be happier just, having you guys and being able to be like, hey, we love Phil and Sebastian, and yeah, to see how we can work with you guys in the future, and all of the above. Yeah, I that kind of wraps up my time that I honestly have. And no, this has been
Yep.
yeah, this has been an absolute blessing, Rowan. Thanks so much for just hanging out and telling us about these coffees and about you. Yeah, I'm excited for everyone else to be able to try these coffees at home, and for anyone to come in and grab a shot before we run out, which I think will probably be after this weekend, to be honest, if not sooner. um but yeah, no, I can't thank you enough, Rowan. This has been a absolute delight. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Well, more than happy to sit down and chat. Thanks for all the great questions, and yeah, I hope you can taste some of the other amazing coffees we have coming up. There's some really exciting things, and I can't hear to wait to see what you think of them.
Let's go. Oh, this is exciting. I love it. Well, thanks again, Rowan. You have a great rest of your day, and yeah, we'll chat soon.
All right. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.